Hello, Laziali all over the world. I was thinking, but honestly, I don't remember when last time Lazio beat it Milan so badly. I have to go back to memory lane and go back to when Paul Gascoigne and Beppe Signori destroyed AC Milan of Fabio Capello 4-0 at home, because the other one was 4-1 second season of Luis Alberto. But again, AC Milan scored once, and it was beginning of the season, and those victories don't count as much as they do when end of January, like yesterday. Um, Honestly, terrific performance, Alistair McKenzie, who's sipping a little bit of tea because here in Rome it's cold, just like in Scotland, I guess. But I have to say something. I'm so not used to beating Milan. Then when Luis Alberto scored the penalty, I said, 76 minutes. So maybe we're going to get a point out of this match, right? I think we're not going to lose this time. Was I the only one thinking about that?
No, I have to admit, the thought ran through my head at one point as well, but it was at 2-0 rather than 3-0. I thought by the time we got to 3, I was feeling fairly confident. I didn't want to say anything because I know what you're like and how anxious you get if I try and say something too soon. But if we don't have to look very far back in history, do we, to find ourselves 2-0 up and throwing a game away? But I mean, honestly, that's as good a performance as we've seen under Maurizio Sarri. That was the ultimate complete 90-minute performance, which is exactly what we've been lamenting Lazio not being able to produce recently, is kind of starting and finishing with an intensity that allows this team to really dominate games from start to finish. And so they did everything right in this game. They scored at the right times. They were relentless. They didn't settle. Like, being 2-0 up is usually a comfortable position. After the Empoli game, perhaps Lazio know now that's not always a comfortable position.
No.
And so that's encouraging that team to push on and on. And honestly, they would not stop. They had their foot on Milan's throat and they wouldn't take it off. And I mean, it was brilliant. We were both in the stadium last night, but the atmosphere was incredible. It was really felt like something special seeing a performance like that.
Yeah, and going back home last night, I was thinking, imagine how much Lazio would have won without Alasdair at the match. I mean, what would have happened? Provedel scoring a hat trick? I don't know. I mean, 4-0 with you at the stadium is something really, really unbelievable. But you're right. The atmosphere was simply amazing. And it was funny because we went to the stadium last week for Lazio Bologna, and Lazio won, but it wasn't the same atmosphere. The stadium was on fire. The fans were ready, and as I was saying before, I felt like I was the only one scared at the match. Everybody was very confident, so I think that's important, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a Milan team that's low on confidence, that's on a bad run of form. But let's be totally honest about this: we've come up against big teams on poor runs before, and that's not necessarily helped. It's been the case where that's these kind of big games for big teams can be a moment for them to turn things around. Whereas Lazio completely capitalized on their weaknesses, and really were very clever in the way that they used their own weapons. Sucking up Milan pressure to try and create these spaces to attack into very quickly, very directly, getting Zaccagni one-on-one as much as possible with Calabria, Calabria is not going to want to watch that game back. I mean, he was skinned so many times by Zaccagni in that match. Felipe Anderson, another absolutely excellent performance, deputizing for Immobile in that false 9 role. Luis Alberto. I mean, this was the hardest thing I had to do last night, Vittorio. Unfortunately, I was working, but I had to pick a man of the match to put in my match report last night. And I was like, God, I can't remember a time where it's been as hard as this, because you could have gone for Anderson, you could have gone for Zaccagni, Milinkovic, Savic, Luis Alberto. All these guys had fantastic matches.
Well, I think apart from Provedel, every player that played for Lazio yesterday could have been man of the match. I mean, let's go. At the beginning of the match, when I saw the starting 11, I went, oh my God, what's going on? Why is I starting? Where is Lazzari? I thought that that was not the decision that made Lazio won the match, but definitely very important. Because what happened? Maruzic switched to the right side where Leao was playing. And I think that Maruzic is one of the few players that physically can cope with Leao. I think Lazzari would have struggled there because Leao is very physical. And moving Maruzic there, he pretty much canceled what was the most dangerous weapon of AC Milan, right? Leao. He didn't do pretty much nothing. On the other side, we have to say that his eye had a good match, and this is not the first of the season. I thought he was playing quite well. Messias isn't Leao, but he's still a dangerous player, and Isai managed to cancel him. So what was my biggest concern seeing Isai playing at the end was the tactic, the decision that was very important and allowed Lazio to win this match, I think, Alasdair.
Yeah, and as much as we want Lazio to sign a proper left back, a natural left back, I mean, as much as Sarri wants a natural left back, you do see here the benefits of having players who are that versatile. Having two of them in Hisai or Marisic who can actually play almost equally comfortably on both sides. I mean, that said, I did think with Marisic, especially when he went on that kind of barnstorming run for the second goal, almost scored, and obviously by hitting the post sets up the Zaccagni goal. But I was wondering, he must be so sick of playing on the wrong side by now that maybe he's just thinking, right, if I'm actually going to get a chance to play on my natural side of the pitch, I need to really up my game here. But yeah, you make a really good point about Leao, and I think that was an especially important role because, like I said before, because Milan have been on this bad run and they're so low in confidence. I mean, I thought their defending was dreadful last night, but actually in attack, they're so short in confidence that they were really resorting to give the ball to Leao and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And Leao is a really dangerous player, and we saw flashes of that last night. He was by far the most likely player up there to do something for them. But because they were trying to get the ball to him as much as possible, Marisic did have a lot of defending to do. You're absolutely right. It's really worth crediting him because I think a game like this is really easy to just focus on the attacking players and what they produce. But this performance was built on a solid bedrock of being able to soak up Milan pressure and restrict them to very, very few opportunities.
I mean,
Get a third clean sheet in a row.
yeah, I mean, Giroud, who I didn't see him yesterday. Was he on the pitch?
Yeah.
I mean, Casale and Romagnoli had another terrific match, another performance. I mean, Giroud is a dangerous player usually, and I don't remember creating any chances. So that's, again, I repeat, apart from Provedel, who really didn't make any save, any important save, from Maruzic to Felipe Anderson, everybody could have been player of the match. I mean, Tonali was pretty much invisible as well. So the thing I don't like, Alasdair, is reading the newspaper today. They're all pointing out on Milan playing badly. I think it's quite the opposite. It's Lazio playing so well that I think even against Napoli, that is the best team in the league, probably we would have won if we played like yesterday, right?
Well, I think it's both things, actually. I mean, the way I put it last night was that Lazio, I think Milan played as badly as Lazio played well. And I think Lazio played very well, but I also think Milan played very badly because you look at some of the defending in those goals, the way that they were all just playing musical statues for the first goal, just watching as Milinkovic Savic puts it in. The Marisic run I was talking about, it's a pretty simple overlap, and for some reason, Dest has exposed 1 versus 2 to create that. I mean, terrible from Kalulu for both the second 2 goals. And look, there's a lot of invention bravery, creativity that is going into these Lazio goals, these Lazio attacks. And if it's not Lazio scoring from these chances, they had plenty of others as well.
Yeah.
So no, I think uh, I know the spirit of what you're saying. The fact that Milan played badly shouldn't take anything away from Lazio's performance, but I think that's why you get this kind of result. Why it's 4-0 we're talking about. It's not a 2-0, which would still be an excellent result. It's a 4-0. And I think that's from the combination of Lazio being at their best and Milan being far from their best.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you don't win that much if the other team doesn't help. But again, performance of Lazio. Um, for example, Sergej Sarri, we finally saw him back. And my question is it because it was a big match and he want to show everybody that he can compete at this level? Or it's because he's finally back in shape and with the right focus? Because after the match yesterday, I was wondering, is this because we played against AC Milan and Milinkovic never scored against Milan? Yesterday was his first goal against this team, and or it's because he's finally back.
I think he's just a big game player, and we've seen this time and time again over the years. I mean, countless occasions Milinkovic Savic has stepped up and performed in the biggest matches. That is something that he routinely does, whether those are derby games, whether those are producing big goals at the right moments. So remember his goal in the Coppa Italia final, for example. I mean, he does it all the time. That's part of the reason I think people become frustrated with him if he doesn't perform against lower table opposition, because he's almost Lazio in a nutshell there. He's capable of this
Yeah.
level. And when he's dropping that level against smaller teams, he's almost symbolic of the entire team and how the team is capable of dropping its level in different matches. And I think that comes on to something really crucial here that Sarri said after the match, that, this is a peculiar place where we were the worst team in Italy after the Lecce game, and now we're the best team in Italy after the Milan game. And we need to find some balance here. And he's absolutely right. We should enjoy this moment. We should celebrate and be euphoric about this kind of result. But still, the Fiorentina game next week is worth the same amount of points, and that's the mark of this team really progressing, is that they're able to continue that momentum.
And not only because if you check the table, yes, we are third, and we have the same points though with Inter and Roma. So we could be easily on Monday night be out of the top five. So
Or second suddenly.
if we win, we could even be second. So you see, it's very short. So every match is very, very important for Lazio. And the next coming fixture is not very easy because we have Fiorentina. That's quite a complicated match, even though they're not playing really well, right? But it's not an easy one. Then we have Coppa Italia against Juventus. Atalanta's coming. Conference League showing up in February. So the schedule is tight, and every match from now on till the end of the season is very, very important. So yes, enjoy the day, enjoy the victory, but we already have to focus for Fiorentina, because if you win against AC Milan and lose against Fiorentina, then you wasted 3 points.
Yeah, exactly. I want to try and get on to some of the messages and stuff that we've had so far, because there's been quite a lot of them. I think one of the best ones we had from Raphael that just said, Lazio didn't play just for 3 points. They wanted to knock Milan off the pitch, beat the shit out of them. So fierce, so terrifying, so exciting. And I think he's very concisely there kind of summed up how that kind of passion that people felt about that result, because I think a lot of it's tied in for me, Vittorio, about this idea of what we would see with Sarri. And last night was like, wow, okay, this is what we signed up for. And we've maybe not seen enough of it, but that was the free-flowing football at its best.
Alasdair, thinking about last year, Last year, Lazio lost at the last second with a terrible mistake of Acerbi. I want to forget that. But playing, I saw an AC Milan convinced that they would have find a way to win. And a Lazio, I don't want to say scared, but not a team believing, okay, we can make it. Last night was completely the opposite. Lazio start playing from the first minute, believing that they had a huge chance to win this match. On the other side, I saw a Milan very frightened, a Milan that was making stupid mistakes and never give me the impression that they believed they could beat us. I think this is the most important difference. Lazio scored immediately, but you could see that from the first second they believed they would have won that match. So that's, I think, had a huge impact.
Yeah, definitely. I think they've picked up that mentality and that confidence to win in these games in a way, um, from experience, I guess. From the fact that they have been doing it so far this season and in previous seasons. Since the time of Inzaghi, Lazio have been capable of knocking down the biggest teams in the league, and that's really encouraging. Like we said, it's just as important to be doing that in the other results, but it's not something to be taken for granted at
No.
all. And Roma, for example, have had a terrible time with that the last 3 years or so. More now, 3.5 under Fonseca and now Mourinho. Roma are really struggling to get any points from their games against fellow kind of top seven teams, and that just puts so much more pressure on you to be beating all these lower mid-table teams when they come. And this is the thing, I guess, where I've kind of snookered myself when we were talking about the top four race after the Empoli match. I said I just can't see a way of Lazio staying in it because we're putting too much pressure on ourselves to be winning all these head-to-head games against direct rivals. But then you go and knock down Milan, and you think, well, maybe we will make up the difference from these games. And also what's happened to Juventus. I mean, we haven't spoken since Juve's points deduction. I don't think this is the podcast to be going through because it's a minefield, but I'm sure everybody knows what's happened there. A 15-point deduction, which has suddenly completely changed the opportunities of a top four finish.
Yeah. And we didn't mention it, but I think it's very important. We scored 4 goals. We beat Milan without Ciro Immobile. This is a huge achievement because we've beaten Atalanta, and we were talking before going live. I don't rate Atalanta as a top team, but you do. We won the derby without Ciro Immobile, but we scored only 1 goal. So I don't remember other matches where Lazio scored more than twice without Ciro Immobile. Scoring 4 goals against Milan without Ciro, that's an improvement. So I know some of our listeners ask us this question: if Lazio is better without Ciro, but definitely winning without Ciro, 4-0 against Milan. That's a statement, Alasdair. That's a positive sign, right?
Yes, to find an alternative way of playing, having started the season without a recognised number two striker and without having really trialed this Anderson idea at all. I mean, looking back to the start of the season when we're talking about it, we were thinking, more that Pedro might be there instead instead of Anderson. I remember,
Cancellieri.
or Cancellieri as well, and yeah, Anderson instead has with his movement. I mean, look, he's a player that Sarri has spoken really highly of the whole time ever since he arrived. Described him as one of the most talented players he'd ever worked with, and it's
Are you
great to
talking about me?
see. It's great to see that kind of potential starting to really show. And well, let's talking about big game players. You know what the common denominator between those wins over Roma, Inter, Milan is? Anderson scored in all of those games. Anderson scored 3 matches in a row now in Serie A for the first time since that 14-15 season.
Four with the Coppa Italia, right?
Including copy, yeah. But he's in great form, and it's actually got to the point where there's reports Chiro will be fit again for Sunday. Do you change it now? do you put him back out on the wing, because it does change things up? And I think that is a nice problem to have. I definitely don't buy into the idea that Lazio are somehow better without a four-time capocannoniere and all-time top scorer, but I can see it's very encouraging that it's even a conversation people are willing to have, because it means something's working.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, scoring. The big season of Felipe Anderson at Lazio, the first year of Pioli, he never scored more than 2 matches in a row in Serie A. So scoring in 3, it's a great achievement. But for example, in the first half, we missed a huge chance. I think Zaccagni crossed from the left, and nobody was in the box to deflect it from a meter or so. That would have been the classic Chiro goal. So I think probably with Chiro we would have scored more goals, and we need to have him back. But the positive thing, Alasdair, here is that we don't have to rush him. I mean, we don't have to make the same mistake again of rushing Chiro back on the pitch and get another injury and say goodbye to him till the end of the season. So we have Felipe. Let's bring on Chiro back slowly to be sure he's 100% fit, to be sure he doesn't get another injury, because Felipe is playing terrific. And we saw last year that he can play every single match. But Pedro's not getting any younger. Zaccagni is another player playing unbelievably well, but he needs a rest, right? So if we have more options, that's going to be better in the future.
Well, how about this question then from Oliver Pill said, do we need another winger? I mean, I hope Iglitare is not listening to this podcast. Don't encourage him. He says, I like how we play without a traditional focal point. It reminds me of Napoli with Mertens centrally. We need a new attacking player. My phone's just locked. But which type of player do you prefer? And it's an interesting question now, isn't it? Because it depends how happy we are with the Anderson plan B. Because if Anderson is the plan B, you kind of do need a bit more on the wings, because Romero and Cancellieri are the only other options there. And like you said, Zaccagni plays a hell of a lot. Pedro's 34, 35. So yeah, suddenly the wings do look a bit sparse if you move him in field. So would you still prefer a number 9 like a Bonazzoli or whoever else we've been linked with, or would you now think, actually, let's stick with Anderson as the plan B and get another winger in?
It depends on Sarri, how he wants to play, honestly. I get that Felipe Anderson is playing really well. Zaccagni is unbelievable. I think the best Italian striker at the moment, the best Italian attacker by far. So,
come on, Nicolo Zaniolo, 40 million euro player. Come on.
Yeah, sorry, forgot about that. We need someone, because we have only 5 players available at the moment, so that's not enough. And we didn't mention, but I don't know what's going on with Cancellieri. Again, yesterday Romero came in and Cancellieri stayed on the bench, and this is not the first time. So I don't know if this means that Sarri thinks Cancellieri is not ready for the second part of the season, that is the toughest. But obviously, if you take Cancellieri out of the equation, then we have only 4 options. I don't know. Bastos is not available, so I know your number 9 is not in the radar.
Can we get through one podcast without you talking about Bastos?
Sorry.
I saw your tweet. I know what you've been up to.
So,
well, I thought we had another really good tweet actually from Karsten, our friend Karsten, who our listeners will know, because he's pointed out really how important Anderson has become, not just because of the fact he's playing so well, but the versatility he provides now means he's absolutely crucial to this team. So he said He's even more important than Sergei Milinkovic-Savic. He just can't get injured. Lazio should hire a personal doctor for Felipe Anderson alone. I mean, he's got a point, doesn't he? Because if Anderson suddenly does have a problem, you've lost your first choice right winger and your second choice striker at the same time.
And one thing we didn't mention is that yesterday at a certain point, Felipe Anderson moved to the right and Pedro played number 9 for a couple of minutes or so. So, you have this type of option. And the other team doesn't know. Are you switching? It's just a moment. It's just for this chance, etc. That create confusion. And especially with a defense that was struggling like AC Milan, I thought that can create a lot of issue. Plus, Felipe Anderson can score in every situation. He can start from the left, turn central, move from the right. He has plenty of options. And this scares the defender because, if you play football, well, you learn that he's left-footed. So you know that you have to push it on the other side. If he's right-footed, you have to. Felipe Anderson can score with both foot. He can dribble past you on the left, on the right, etc. So that's what makes him so hard to mark when he's focused. And the biggest thing is this, Alison, because everybody knew about the talent Felipe Anderson have, but he has never been so consistent. This is the game changer, right? I don't know what Sarri did, but Felipe Anderson is focused and has been focused since the beginning of the season.
Well, I think in Sarri, he's found a coach who really believes in him. And that makes a big difference because I think previously he's had problems where he's, I think, run into coaches who either have lost faith in the fact that he's anything more than just a talented but inconsistent winger who's, hot and cold too often, or he's come up against a coach who's just not playing the right style of football that's going to get the best out of him, which I think was the case when he was at West Ham, for example.
Or direi at Lazio.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Sarri is almost the perfect match for him. I mean, Sarri has done everything I think he can by now to try and stop people comparing him to Dries Mertens. Because this keeps coming up. I mean, we've talked about it. I've definitely brought it up time and time again. But I don't think Sarri wants to put that kind of pressure on him. I think he's just always believed in his ability as a player. And I think if you're a confidence player, and Anderson always has been a confidence player, I think when his tail is up, when he's really full of confidence, that's when he's going to be playing his best stuff. And just having a coach like Sarri who really believes in his ability, but combines that willingness to believe in him, give him the confidence with playing the style of football that suits him, I think that's the secret to actually getting the best out of him.
Yeah, and I think also the teammates are helping him, right? Playing with Pedro, Zaccagni at the moment definitely helps him because when you're playing against Lazio now, you cannot, simply double mark Felipe Anderson because Zaccagni is always 1-against-1 and he can be really dangerous. Same thing, Pedro. So, I think this is a huge advantage for Felipe Anderson. And he's showing it. So the other thing important is he's playing so much, from this year and the last season. He pretty much played every single match, which is unbelievable. And he already scored twice against big team, 3 times if you consider Rome as well. He scored against Inter, he scored in the derby, he scored against AC Milan. I mean, that's another very important thing. I don't consider Atalanta, but if you want, we can add Atalanta as well. So pretty much he scored all in key matches, right? So that's another very important point because we were talking about Felipe Anderson being key player in small matches. Now he's able to do it in big games, which is even more difficult.
And what about Luis Alberto? Because I mean, it is amazing how quickly the narrative has shifted here. turn of the year, January transfer market opens. Same old story. Transfer rumors.
Yep.
He wants to go back to Spain. Sarri talks about it. Alberto talks about it. Spanish press all over it. I mean, it's the same most transfer markets anyway. But somehow, in the midst of all of this, he's produced his best football of the entire season, and he's found his way back into the starting lineup. And he's also benefited, of course, with the Vecino coming back from the World Cup and not being fully fit, with Basic not being in good form. But it's kind of locked in again now, isn't it? The Milinkovic, Savic, Alberto, Cataldi midfield feels like it's functioning as well, because I think previously there were doubts about, is that solid enough? Is that going to provide enough kind of legs and energy and dynamism and ball winning in the middle of the park that we need? But it's functioning really well at the moment.
Well, definitely. And how can you make a change now? With Milinkovic Savic back at his top form, with Luis Alberto playing so well. I mean, I don't think even Vecino's dad will play him next Sunday, right? I mean, how can you? And the thing that Vecino didn't come in yesterday, it's a very important fact, because the only other match where he didn't play was against Sampdoria, beginning of the season. So I think this tells you the improvement of Luis Alberto and how Sarri trusts Luis Alberto to play. So I think this is very, very important. And Sarri said it at the beginning of the year. He said, Luis Alberto is our best player at the moment. He's in great shape, great condition. And if he plays like that, he's one of our greatest players. And I think he showed it in a big match against AC Milan. Now, we don't have to stop, because there's Fiorentina coming up, and that's another vital match for us.
Yeah, and this is going to be the last time for a while, I think, that we get a full week to prepare for a match. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a full week, obviously, because it was a Tuesday night game to begin with, but you know what I mean. There's no midweek games. And well, speaking of which, I mean, just before we finish, I guess we should touch on the Coppa Italia win as well, because we've not spoken since then. And 1-0 win over Bologna. It wasn't the most electrifying game in comparison to last night, but through to the quarterfinals. Juventus away next week in the quarterfinals. What did you think of that?
Well, we saw Maximiano, right? So
Yeah,
that's good.
he's only allowed to play against Bologna.
Yeah.
It's in his contract.
And we saw he learned that he cannot touch the ball with the hands outside the penalty box, right?
Well, I just remember when the clock got to about 10 minutes, I was like, okay, good. He's already made it further than last time. But yeah, it wasn't really a match where we could get much of an idea about Maximiano, was it?
No, he made just one save, if I remember correctly. But I think it was good to see him on the pitch. It was good to see Patrick back, because we never talked about it. But Patrick is not playing anymore, which is surprising considering the last couple of years, right? He was starting last season ahead of Luis Felipe. He was starting with Simone Inzaghi. So seeing on the bench, yes, he has been injured, but seeing on the bench was, I would say, a surprise. I know someone would be a little bit surprised by my statement, but yes. And so it was good to see him back playing. I was surprised, Alistair, that pretty much that was our starting 11, except from Patrick and Maximiano. So I thought Sarri would have rotated much more the team. There were rumors that Cancellieri would have started. He didn't. Marcos Antonio would have started. He didn't. Again, another opportunity for Basic, who he didn't have. So that was my biggest surprise.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It wasn't. I guess we were talking about that before the game, weren't we? The kind of how much is he going to stick or twist, and you're not playing a Serie B team here. You're playing a decent team. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure we really learned anything new, to be honest. I mean, we did learn that Maximiano is still in the reckoning. You know, he's not being completely frozen out, so that's good. But otherwise, yeah, solid routine win, really, I think. And yeah, the clean sheets are back. I mean, that's been hugely encouraging, is to see those three clean sheets in a row. And yesterday, the perfect combination, really, of both sides of the game that we've talked about, because defense was brilliant, the midfield was exceptional, and obviously the forward line were clinical as well. So really, the all round performance from Lazio was, I think, the best we've had under Sarri.
Yep, definitely. And we are close to be again the best defense of Serie A. So that's another very good point. You know, our attack is still very good, and if we keep improving, then we can definitely fight for the Champions League. One thing, Alistair, before we wrap it up, I'm not very pleased of the words of Milinkovic Savic when they asked him, "What about the Scudetto?" And he said, "If we play like that, I mean, we just win the second match in a row. Lazio Empoli is just a couple of days ago. We lost against Lecce at the beginning of the year. I mean, why talk about the Scudetto? Doesn't make sense, right?"
Well, because Milinkovic Savic is Lazio, we're going to come full circle with this idea of him symbolizing Lazio. He feels that euphoria that the rest of us feel, and he sees the potential, and he falls for it time and time again, like the rest of us. That's why he's been around for 7 years, as he keeps falling for it and believing that it's possible. But I mean, look, we know Lazio are capable of these performances. It's not just Sarri. You know, in Zaghi's time, we were beating big teams and putting in great performances in big matches. But it's the grind. That's where you win titles, is in Salernitana or at Lecce. You know,
Yeah.
that's the boring truth of it. And that's where Lazio need to get better. So yeah, I don't know. I don't mind him, enjoying the moment a little bit. I don't think he was being too serious.
Well, I hope so. Anyway, thanks again, Alistair, for joining me. Thanks everybody for listening, and we're gonna be back next Monday after Lazio Fiorentina, another very, very, very important match for our team, and let's hope that we play just like yesterday. Goodbye.
Cheers.